Picture this. A woman pulls a metal box grater off a shelf and places it on the kitchen table. A tiny stove, made of a metal milk can, sits on the counter, and she feeds scraps of wood into it as the pot of water above it begins to boil. The bowl of bulbs on the table could have been mistaken for onions, but as she begins to grate them, it's clear these are something quite different. The pink, government-issued recipe pamphlet next to her suggests adding vegetable oil and curry powder. She puts it all into the pot to boil. This is the famine of the winter of 1944 to 45, the hunger winter in the Netherlands, and she is one of millions of people trying to survive by preparing soup made of tulip bulbs. You are listening to Plant Connection. Life today can feel overwhelming, like we've drifted away from its natural rhythm. This podcast is your space to slow down, breathe, and rediscover the peace and clarity that come from reconnecting with the natural world. I'm your host, Lisa Cutshaw. Let's reconnect, one plant at a time. Have you ever eaten a tulip bulb? I have not, and I didn't know you could until recently. But if you have eaten one, you are in good company. Famously, Audrey Hepburn survived that winter as a 15-year-old by eating tulips. Soup wasn't the only option. You could also dry the bulbs and grind them up to make flour for bread. Thank goodness for tulip bulbs, right? I didn't expect this to be the kind of story I'd find for tulips when my son asked me to do this episode. Like a lot of people, most Americans I suspect, I associate tulips with colorful spring flowers, usually planted someplace near the front door or driveway entrance for maximum impact. They are bright and cheerful and color coordinated. But real life isn't a single note, even for beauty. It comes in chords, and sometimes with an undercurrent that leads to a completely different melody down the road. They are native to an area stretching from southern Europe to Central Asia, with Turkey being the original source that introduced them to Europe in the 1500s. The Ottoman emperor is thought to have sent some bulbs to the Habsburgs as a gift. The flowers were already important to the local cultures where they were native. The earliest known written mention of the tulip is from the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, written in the 11th or early 12th century. And of course, I'm sure they were grown before that, just not written about in anything we've found to date. Of course, the introduction of the tulip to Europe in the 1550s eventually led to the famous Tulip Mania of the 1630s, so just 80 years later. Why did tulips become so popular? Probably because of that colorful nature I mentioned. It was much more colorful than most other flowers of the time, and because it grows from a bulb, it can be forced to flower pretty much any time of year if you give it the right conditions. Of course, the nobility were the first connoisseurs. Add in the growing wealth of the Dutch merchants at the time, think Dutch East India Company, and you had a well-to-do bourgeois class who wanted to spend their money on beautiful things. The Tulip Mania itself started in 1634, with people spending more and more money to get prized bulbs. By the height of the craze, the most prized bulbs were selling for 10 times the annual income of an artisan in Amsterdam. So what was so special about the most desirable bulbs? It was all about the color of the flower they grew. Have you ever seen a tulip flower that has two colors? Maybe it's stripy, or it transitions from one color at the base to another at the tip of the petals. Well, that stripy, kind of veined variety were the most coveted in the 1630s. Certain varieties had been discovered that grew with stunningly beautiful patterns. One, called the Viceroy, was white with veins of purple running through it. The variety that brought the highest price was called Semper Augustus and had a white background heavily veined with red. Now, I know beauty is subjective, but I think it's fair to say that these were beautiful flowers by modern standards as well. So why were they so expensive? Keep in mind, when I say they could sell for 10 times an artisan's salary, I mean one bulb. One. And just like now, that bulb was only going to flower for a week or so in the spring, and that bulb would produce one flower. You might think some enterprising nursery owner would just grow a bazillion bulbs and sell them, right? The thing is, those beautiful color patterns were hard to get, and crossbreeding didn't reliably produce them. No one knew what caused them at the time. We know now that those beautiful patterns were caused by a virus. The plants were actually sick, and most of the varieties that were so prized 400 years ago are now extinct. The virus itself was called the tulip breaking virus, referring to the flowers breaking into different colors. The Tulip Mania had some interesting long-term effects. When I was in high school, we learned that people went bankrupt overnight when the bubble burst, but it turns out that wasn't true. The bubble did burst, but historians have found that there was no lasting damage to the economy, and no one is known to have declared bankruptcy from it. It's considered the first speculative bubble in recorded history, and some of what we recognize as modern economic trade grew out of it. If you've ever heard of people trading futures, that came out of this time period. Why? Because you can't just snap your fingers and get a new plant. You have to wait for bulbs to grow, and that waiting period over the winter was when people would bid to buy. So they were buying future plants that didn't really exist yet. Many of the bidding and contract practices used grew into the foundation of common trading markets today. Short selling, broker fees, trading contracts, all of these were practices familiar to the 17th century tulip market. Strangely, no one knows exactly why the market crashed in 1637. We do know that by early February of that year, buyers were no longer willing to pay the asking prices. That didn't stop tulips from being a popular flower, though. Today, the Netherlands export more than 4 billion tulip bulbs per year, representing about 90% of the market. Where I live, hybrid tulips don't tend to naturalize well, so most people replant them every year to get that vibrant show of color. We planted a few varieties last fall in our yard, and we're enjoying the last of the flowers now. Among the hybrids, you'll usually see varieties grouped as early, mid-spring, or late bloomers. The early ones often start flowering in late March or early April, after the daffodils have pretty much done their show. Mid-spring bloomers usually flower in mid-April to early May, and the late bloomers are going strong now in May. They are ubiquitous in our culture as a sign of spring, often included in flower arrangements and artwork relating to Easter. Their cheerful, innocent appeal even shows up in a lot of imagery meant for kids. Children's books, cartoons, etc. That's how my son knows them, and is why tulip is one of his favorite flowers. Anyone who's familiar with the Little Einsteins cartoon series may remember the tulip episode they did. My son has loved tulips ever since he watched that, which was years ago now. So if you want to grow tulips, what do you need to do? Well, first, make sure you buy healthy bulbs. If they are mushy or so dry that they crack apart with light pressure, pass them up. A healthy bulb will be firm to the touch. It will have a papery skin, kind of like an onion, but the bulb inside should be solid. They need to be planted in well-drained soil in a sunny spot, and it's best to plant them in the fall after the soil temperature has dropped. They don't like too much heat. They should get a good watering when you plant them, but after that, they should be okay on their own. Soil that stays damp will promote rot. Once they have bloomed, wait until the leaves turn yellow, then dig up the bulbs and store them in a cool, dry place until the fall if you want to replant them. The bulb itself stores the nutrition that the plant will use to grow the following year, so it needs all that photosynthesis the leaves do in the spring to store energy. So if you like bright, cheerful flowers in the spring, tulips are a great choice. They come in a huge assortment of colors, including white, yellow, pink, red, and purple. The flower shape comes in a lot of different varieties too, from the classic single tulip to doubles to ruffled edges. And if you want to get some of those stunning two-tone veined patterns that were so popular in the 1600s, there are plenty of modern varieties available, and they're healthy bulbs these days too, no virus required. If you want a white and purple variety similar to Viceroy, the Triumph Flaming Flag or Rem's favorite varieties both give a bit of that veining. It won't be exactly the same, but you still get some of that effect. And for something similar to the white and red of Semper Augustus, the Carnaval de Nice variety or Grand Perfection are both stunners. No matter what variety you choose, I hope tulips spread a little cheer today. See you outside. Thank you for joining me on this journey back to nature with Plant Connection. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to tap subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss the next episode. See you next time.